Hi everyone, welcome back to episode number 34 of AgogeTV with me, your host Phil Leonard.
I'm your host Josh Summersgill.
On today's podcast, we have Commonwealth silver medalist Sarah Davies, and that silver medalist in weightlifting. I just assume everybody does weightlifting or CrossFit these days. You could just be a silver medalist in loads of things.
I mean, I'll take it.
So I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to tell us a bit more about herself. First things first, Sarah. How did you get into weightlifting? Where did that all start? And how long have you been weightlifting for?
I'm Sarah. I'm a weightlifter. I compete for Great Britain and for England. I first found weightlifting when I was at university, in my second year. Start of my second year, September 2011. At the time, I was in Leeds, and that's where our national team were for weightlifting in the build up to London. So I was exposed to it through that. I did my first ever weightlifting session. I snatched 30 kilos and clean and jerk 40 kilos. And a few people were like, you could be good at this, like give it a try. And I remember at the time, for what was going on, it was like, oh, if you could get to like 60, 80, like that'd be decent. You'd be competitive, like within nationals and stuff. And so I did my first competition, and I did a 45 kilo snatch and a 65 kilo clean and jerk, and that was in the November. So I started in the September, did that in the November, which qualified me for my first English championships, because at the time in what was the 63 class, you only needed a 90 kilo total to qualify for nationals. Right. I think now it's about 130 for the English and about 150 for the British. So, and you need to be snatching over 90 kilos to be even in the medals. So that's kind of cool to see how far the sport's grown in this country, and it is credit to CrossFit, just for making the sport more popular.
We didn't make you say that, did we?
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. I kind of did weightlifting before it was cool, I guess, because I then went to the English and got a silver medal because there was 3 people in the weight class. So, like, you could go up to a nationals and win a medal because, you're one of the only people there. And then, following 2012, I remember competing in the British, which was our final qualification for those trying to get to London. And to be a part of that, I competed against Zoe Smith and Emily Godley. She's now Musket, but in the 63 class, and they were 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2 on the podium, and I was number 3. And if somebody had said then, like 4 years time you're going to be competing for an Olympic spot yourself, I'd have probably been a little bit in shock and said I don't think so. I think you maybe got me confused. But I did always want to do that when I started weightlifting, and got as good as I did, as quickly as I did. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go Commonwealth Games and Olympic Games. And 2014 I did my first international. I actually did a small international first in the January, February time, which was called the Tri-Nations, which we don't have anymore, but it was England against Sweden and Norway. Right. It was just a fun little competition in Norway. We used to send a senior, a junior, and a youth males, and then just one female, because we didn't have enough females in the sport to be able to do the same across both genders, which kind of shows now, how crazy that is, because the women is potentially more competitive now at that top end than the men's weightlifting is, especially in this country. And then that qualified me to do that Europeans that April, senior Europeans. And then I went on to my first Commonwealth Games up in Glasgow and represented England, which was pretty surreal. I remember watching the Manchester Commonwealths in 2002 as a gymnast, thinking that's awesome. Like, I want to go to the Commonwealth Games and represent England, but never in a million years did I imagine it would be for weightlifting. I missed out on Rio, unfortunately, with a spinal fracture. So that sucked. But
feel your pain, bro. Feel your pain.
I gave it a good shot. I stuck, I think it was like a 3 kilo PB on the bar for clean and jerk, and just had 3 attempts at it to try and get it above my head to qualify to go still, even though I had excruciating pain in my back. But at the time we were funded, and I had medical team behind me to try and, manage it and support it. After Rio, we lost our funding. And then I set up my business, and, obviously didn't have too much of an effect, because then I went on to Gold Coast Commonwealth Games in 2018 and got my silver medal. So yeah, I guess that's a very quick whirlwind trip of my career.
So a couple of things that I want to unpack from that. First thing, so your original sporting background before weightlifting was gymnastics.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And now I'm gonna have a dig at you lot, like real gymnastics, you know, like bars, bolt, beam, floor. Like I did some pull-ups and stuff, like as part of my conditioning, but I ain't counting that as gymnastics. I'm talking proper stuff, like somersaults and that on a beam.
Yeah, no, my girlfriend is an ex-gymnast, so I'm well aware of what real gymnastics is. Because unfortunately, she's. I'm not going to actually outright say she's better than me at most things, but you know, she's pretty good, especially if it comes to any sort of handstand walking or anything like that. But she obviously took to weightlifting pretty quickly as well. So that helped. Did being from weightlifting, did being from a gymnastic background really help with weightlifting, or not at all?
Yeah, 100%. Like I'll hold my hands up and say, you know, my gymnastics coaches have a lot to answer for, even though there was quite a gap between, you know, my gymnastics and my weightlifting careers. You look at some of the best gymnasts on our national team. Zoe's an ex-gymnast. You look internationally, you've got Kate Nye, who's absolutely tearing it up from the US. She's an ex-gymnast. And I think it just teaches you so many fundamental skills of just body awareness and, you know, that flexibility and stuff, but also that strength and power and speed and stuff as well. It just all transfers over. Like I've always said, if I have kids, they're going to gymnastics at least for a couple of years, just to learn those basic like fundamentals of movement.
Agreed. It's funny, isn't it? Because like as guys, we were all like, I played rugby, Josh played football, and like now that we're doing CrossFit, we're like, Mum, why didn't you send me to gymnastics?
Yeah, exactly.
Parenting. But the thing is, like, I mean, I'm not making excuses, but when we was obviously young and at school, like the lads played football and the girls were doing handstands.
Yeah, it's just, you know,
it's not like that anymore, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, you look at some of our gymnasts now, like the men's side of it. I mean, they're all pretty short, but they're all incredibly strong. Like the stuff they can do is just craziness. And I think there's a totally different perception now in men's gymnastics as there is with women's weightlifting. Like they've all kind of done a bit of a switch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. For the best as well. And the other thing that you mentioned as well is you started out with, was it a 30 kilogram snatch and a 40 kilogram clean and jerk?
Yeah.
Now, I just want like, what are your current personal best, just so people can compare that?
So my best snatch is 101 kilos and clean and jerk 128. Can you two do that?
You can.
I can. What's yours, Phil?
Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about CrossFit.
Oh dear.
No, I was well aware that you were way stronger than I am before I got on the podcast. I was watching Josh sort of line that one up from a distance. He's like,
What Sarah doesn't realise, I've asked Sarah to come on just for that. That's been coming for weeks.
just fire shots at me. Brilliant.
Something I want to pick up on as well, Sarah, that you mentioned. Now, obviously, injury in any kind of competitive sport is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
People say you can avoid it, and I don't believe for a second that you can. Yes, you can sort of mitigate it where possible, but you're always going to pick up certain, obviously, knocks and even sort of bad injuries, should we say.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you fractured your spine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason my ears picked up on that was because the same thing happened to me a couple of years ago. And just sort of like, just out of interest, how did it happen? Like, how was your recovery? Are you perfectly recovered now? Just talk a bit about that for me.
Yeah, so it was a pars fracture. So it's a bit, you know, with your vertebrae, you've got like the little tail that comes down the back that kind of stops them all sliding around. It was that bit that went. And I mean, I can tell you the lift that did it. I did a jerk at the European under 23s, 113 kilos, and the angle of my back was somewhat interesting. Basically, it was miles out in front, but it was to secure the gold medal in clean and jerk and total. So I was holding on to that sucker come hell or high water. And yeah, and I came off and I was like, I gave my coach a hug and stuff, and I was I felt my back a little bit on that, but like didn't think anything of it because, you know, it would be just a bit of a tweak or something. And around that time was the build up to Rio qualification, and the British weightlifting at the time forced me down into the 58 class for a couple of competitions, which was extremely unhealthy. You know, I was sub 10% body fat, and it was scary to look back now how skinny I was, but it was all about Olympic qualification. And I do believe that had an impact, especially as a woman, on like bone density and stuff like that. I think that probably was not necessarily the direct cause, but definitely a contributing factor. Obviously that lift was what did it, but I didn't actually really notice the pain then until a little while later, because obviously I'd come off a competition, I then went into like a volume phase and loads of strength work and stuff like that, so there was no high impact like heavy load going through, and then, you know, it did get progressively worse, and I was getting pain. And like I said, we were funded then, and I had all the medical support, but the physio and the team doctor at the time just wouldn't let me go for a scan. They were like, oh, we want to try this low level core stuff, like, you know, we don't really know what it is, let's try this. And I remember our performance director went into the doctor's office and went in like screaming and like, I don't care what it is, like, you know, we've got an Olympics coming up, like we can do the low level core, but I want it to be scanned, like we need to know what's going on. And the doctor's like, oh, but then we won't know what fixes it. It was like, I don't care what fixes it, like I need my athlete, like, you know, throw everything at it and just see, you know, hopefully we'll come out the other side of it. And yeah, it was a case of managing it for the longest time. You know, that was the October, and obviously the Olympic qualification was in the following summer. And I was fortunate that I had the insurance to go and see all the top doctors and everything, and I finally got a scan that confirmed it. And yeah, so we managed it up until that final qualifier, because the doctor basically said, you know, what are your chances of Rio? And I was like, oh, you know, kind of outside shot. And he was like, well, we'll keep you managed, and then depending on what the outcome is of qualification, like we'll take the course then. And you know, it was probably for the best that I didn't go to Rio, because it might have caused further damage. But yeah, in terms of the rehab, so I then after that did nothing for 6 weeks. Well, actually I went to Disneyland in Orlando and had a great time.
Back to spine, I know, roller coasters.
Yeah, when I told my physio, he lost his shit, but I was like, I don't care. That was towards the end of my 6 weeks, and then I did 6 weeks of no spinal loading, so like bodybuilding type stuff, to a point, you know, the 6 weeks of doing nothing, like I wasn't even allowed to like seated shoulder press or anything, like I wasn't allowed any load at all. So I was a normal person for 6 weeks, which was fun for the first couple of weeks, and then you start losing your mind, and then I'm like, oh, I can do some bodybuilding, which is exciting for the first 2 weeks, and I'm like, I want to do real weightlifting. Yeah. And we kind of progressed it, and then I started doing, you know, things like belted squats and stuff, so I was loading from the waist down, and loads of dumbbell work and stuff like that, and it was just a case of gradually building it back up. And you know, touch wood, I don't feel anything now. It is an area that I've been cautious of, and I mean, my first coach had struggled with back injuries and stuff anyway, so I'd like to think that we'd always been proactive in preventing something like that, but that was more in terms of like disc bulges and stuff like that that's really common in weightlifting. So generally my back is pretty healthy, so it was a bit of a shock when we had that diagnosis and stuff, but you know, I make sure I keep on top of all my core work, and my body weight now is much healthier. You know, at 58 kilos, I was so skinny. It was like trying to load weights on a pinprick. Like it's never going to go well, is it? Whereas now, you know, I've got the body weight back up and a bit thicker and a bit more stability there to hold it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Great stuff. I also wanted to ask you about beauty pageants, because I know that we can't.
Bill's going to start up. That's what he's doing now.
Yeah, that's my.
You've enjoyed his coach as a weightlifter, Sarah. He's going to go.
We'll let you come in and coach everybody at the gym for us. And to be fair, there was a picture the other day of somebody. It wasn't me, but everybody thought it was me in booty shorts. And like, I think Josh is going to try and find the picture for you, but people were convinced that it was me, and I got so many messages going, "What's this? Why are you in booty shorts?"
That's Phil.
I was like,
"Tell me that is 100% Phil."
It's the hair too.
My ass isn't that big. I'm just like, just saying. We'll probably have to put that in the show notes for those that are listening, but maybe I might forget about it. I've completely forgot where I was going. Sorry, yeah, beauty pageants. So I would say that's very contrasting things to be interested in and passionate about. So can you just explain a bit about how you got into beauty pageants as well? And
yeah, they're definitely offset each other, don't they? Like, people don't expect a weightlifter to do pageants, and equally people don't expect pageant girls to do weightlifting. So I mean, it kind of started around the same time as my weightlifting career. I was working in a pub as a student, and there was an advert in the local like magazine that went round for contestants for Miss Leeds in 2012. And you know, that all the locals in the pub, 'cause it's a proper like old man pub, they're like, you should do it, like you should enter and this and that. And I was like, no. And then anyway, peer pressure got the better of me, and I entered and then ended up winning, and then went on to Miss England and got bitten by the pageant bug, as they say. So I realized that, you know, I could use it as a platform to promote healthy body image and stuff like that. And I mean, as a gymnast, when I started high school, I was bullied for being muscular, because having an 8-pack and pecs at 12, 13 years old as a girl isn't normal. And obviously we all know that's where bullying stems from, is people being a little bit different. So I was actually like, do you know what, I can put myself out there, and even if there's just one 13-year-old me somewhere that sees it and goes, do you know what, this is so cool, like I can be badass and have muscles and still be all these other things that, you know, we enjoy being as women. So yeah, that's kind of it really, and it's kind of run from there. And to a point, I've competed multiple times nationally, and then also internationally. I went out to the Philippines in 2019 and competed out there for England, so that was pretty cool.
Wow.
And it's a really good message as well, because like, I know if my daughter come home and was like stacked, I'd been made up, you know what I mean? but I think coming from the world that we live in, it is just like, it's seen as more acceptable for us.
Yeah, and I mean, like the early 2000s, I think, are very different to the world we live in now when it comes to women as athletes. I think, you know, that is one legacy that came out of London 2012 for us. I mean, I feel like we didn't have much legacy that stuck around, but seeing pictures of Jessica Ennis-Hill everywhere and all that kind of stuff did have a big change and influence on female athletes, I think. So it's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, like I said, it's a really important message for lots of girls, lots of women. Because I don't think there's any. I might be completely wrong, but I don't think there's anybody that doesn't struggle somewhat with body image. Even the most confident-looking people are probably insecure about something. So, like I say, and for you to be promoting that, I think that's pretty awesome. I'd just like to ask you as well. Like, I don't know anything about pageants. I'm not gonna like.
You're not the only one.
I can tell. I know a little bit about weightlifting, but pageants. So, how do you win, basically?
So pageants are a lot different now to what people kind of have the stereotypical view of. People kind of remember pageants from the 70s and 80s of like, you know, I want world peace and all that kind of stuff that you see like in the Miss Congeniality movies, like taking the mick out of and stuff. But a huge part of it now is about being a role model and being a woman that, you know, makes a difference in their community. So there's a huge sort of sway on like charity work and stuff, and, you know, making appearances as a title holder to make a difference and having a platform. So like for me, you know, obviously it's body image, but I've got friends who are lawyers, dentists, doctors, you name it. And, you know, it's very much about being a modern woman and being able to make a difference in the world. It's very far removed from what was once just the airhead looking pretty and being tall and skinny. You know, you see women from all walks of life, so all different body shapes and sizes. And a big portion of the scoring now is also on interview. So at the end of the day, pageants are businesses, and the winner is there to represent that business for that year. So a big part of it is interview, and like, you know, over half of the percentage of the scores quite often comes down to that, and it is about how you will represent that company, that business, and your own brand for that year. And then obviously we do still have the onstage portion of it, and there is still, for some systems, there's still swimwear. Some now do like a sportswear, but it's very much to keep people at bay, but it's still a sports bra and shorts, which isn't that far removed from a bikini. So I'm a little bit like, what's the point? But it is about having a healthy body. So, you know, if someone did look unhealthy, and, you know, on that verge of like an eating disorder or something, then they would probably score a little bit lower, because they're not given across that body image that, you know, you want young girls to look up to. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of everything really, and it's not just about being tall and skinny, because I definitely wouldn't win then.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that. Like, I'm totally ignorant and naive. I was just like, oh, it's just like a bodybuilding show. They all go on stage. It's like, oh, I'm really pretty. Pick me.
Yeah, a lot of it goes on behind the scenes. Like, a lot of people don't see the actual, you know, the work that goes in. The work to go into winning a national title starts, you know, 6 months to a year before. And, you know, a lot of the interview and stuff like that. And some competitions are over a couple of days, so they're watching how you interact with the other girls, other people. Like, if you're in a hotel, even just seeing, like, there's like sort of like spy judges, like seeing how you interact with hotel staff and stuff. Like, there's no good you giving away a perfect interview if you treat people like dirt walking down the street. Like, that's not someone you want representing your brand. So
I like that. So it's about like the person you are as well.
yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Moral of the story is, don't be a dick, be a good person.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll do all right in both weightlifting and pageants. So think we smashed. that was very oversimplified, wasn't it? But I think but we're wrong with it. So that's really cool, and like I say, I think there's some important messages there. More important messages as well, though, and the things that obviously me and Josh are interested in would be your advice for weightlifters, people who are interested in weightlifting, and then we'll get into your advice for weightlifters for CrossFitters later, because I think that might be a bit different.
I think that the main thing is finding yourself a good coach, and not just trying to teach yourself from watching YouTube videos. As a coach myself, I spend most of my time trying to correct that, like people that have either learned, like the blind leading the blind, like learned from somebody else who's not got that much, you know, experience in coaching or in the sport. And also the amount of people that just sit and think if they watch hours and hours of all things gym, hook grip, weightlifting house, that they're going to suddenly turn into Lu Xiaojun and be a superhero. Like, that's not the case.
Damn it.
And more to the point, like everyone's built differently as well. Like, you know, if you're 6'2", your lifting is not going to look like mine does at 5'3" and a bit. The bit matters. Like, you know, limb lengths are a massive part of it. Like, I've got a really long body and short legs, but I've also got long arms, like, which doesn't make sense. And, you know, someone with long legs and a short body, like, their start position just isn't going to look the same as mine. And there's loads of stuff like that is, you know, comes into play, and you can't just copy. Like, the Chinese are going to be built different to you unless you are Chinese and whatever. But, you know, like, that's the most common thing I see, is a lot of kind of Caucasian people trying to copy the Chinese, and there's so many factors that come into it as to why they're superheroes. But you know, just their like ligament elasticity is different, and their mobility is different, and the fact that they've been beaten into being mobile since they were about 3 as well probably plays a big factor in it. But yeah, that's the main thing, is to find yourself a good coach who's going to work with you as an individual, and find what works and what doesn't for you. Because if you get those basics right, you know, then it's going to develop. And I mean, I learned weightlifting by someone going, this is a snatch, this is a clean and jerk, try it, which worked for me, given my background and my, like we were saying, my body awareness. But, you know, you can't just walk into the gym and do a snatch. It needs to be broken down, and you need to learn each stage of the movement, and get that nailed first. And as a coach, the 2 things that I say are most important before you learn to snatch is being able to do a good muscle snatch and a good snatch balance. Because if you think about those 2 movements, if you stick them together, you then end up with a snatch. You know, you've got the muscle snatch as a nice long pull, and the snatch balance is a drop and receive. Like, they're, to me, as a coach, fundamental movements to, before somebody can snatch, they need to be doing those correctly.
And you lift more than me, and I personally hate both of those things, so probably explains a lot.
Something I want to touch on as well with like just what you just said. It was on about something today, and basically what, and I'm sure you'll agree on this, if people are sort of like self-taught and don't have a coach, like let's say, like you just said, they spend all day on YouTube watching all these different videos. I think one of the biggest problems is there's so many different styles of weightlifting, isn't there? And there's so many different sort of routes to get to that end goal. People tend to sort of like just take bits from everything unknowingly, and then end up with like this car crash of a lift.
Yeah, that's exactly
almost
what
like
happens.
Just like you just said, go and find a coach, or just like listen to one person or one style? Do you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of information out there now, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's the thing, and people want a quick fix. Like, I actually had someone that came to me recently, and they, I wrote him an 8-week program. He was like, "Oh, but there's not that much variation from week to week. I think you should be doing this, that, and the other." And he was like, "Can I have a refund?" I was like, "I've just written you an 8-week program, completely personalized to you. Like, if you don't think I know what I'm doing, like, that's your problem. But my sort of results speak for myself." But people want that quick fix. They want it to be exciting. They want to be lifting 1 rep max all the time, but that isn't what makes you strong. Like, putting the work in, putting the reps in is what makes you strong. And like you said, people, they become internet coaches in their truest form and, see it from whichever way. And then, this guy's now coached by somebody else after doing my program for about a week.
But it's for the best over there, out the way.
Oh yeah, I won't be losing sleep over it, that's for sure.
No, and like you say, it is really interesting because you see people like that are like, I just want to get better now, and like I think we've all probably fell into that trap at some point, but you don't get better unless you're patient with it, and
that was a huge thing for me. Like, coming from gymnastics, obviously hugely skill based. Like, there's some strength in it, but it's hugely skill based. If you practice something over and over and over, you're going to get better at it. And that's what I had to learn in weightlifting, is I couldn't just do hours and hours and hours in the gym, because if you're working at the right percentage to actually build strength in that movement, like, you can't train that much. And I think that's one thing that I learned. I'm like, well, why am I not getting better? And it's like, your body has to have that time to adapt and to change. I'm 9 years into a career and probably not even quite at the peak of it yet, which just kind of goes to show how long it does take to reach those kind of numbers.
Yeah. And just for those people that do walk into my CrossFit gym and then ask, why can't I snatch after the first session? well, it's because it takes 9 years to get any sort of, you know what I mean? It's like, it takes a lot.
Exactly.
Well, Trav made a good point, didn't he? Like, when, I'm sure you know of Adam Travis, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he was on one of the first podcasts that we did, and he basically said he made a good point that was basically like, it'll take you at least 5 years to be able to snatch really well. He said, like, you look at it as in like a black belt in a martial art, and a lot of people, especially in CrossFit, look at it as, oh, it's just another movement, like a wall ball or a thruster, and it isn't.
No, it's so complicated, and especially where people are generally coming into CrossFit a little bit later as they keep fit. Like, it's so much harder for you to build those, like, if we're getting sciencey, build those neural pathways and stuff to learn a new movement. And there's all the research behind having to do a movement X number of times before it becomes a second nature. And even 9 years into a career, my snatch technique still isn't perfect. My jerk technique definitely isn't perfect. Like, there's still work to be done, and it's always changing. So you can't expect to do weightlifting for 3 years. Say if you've been CrossFitting for 3 years, like, there's so many skills in CrossFit as well that you have to learn to then be able to commit the time to learn such a complex movement in weightlifting as well, is what makes it so difficult, I think.
Yeah, cool. So that brings me on to kind of my next question really nicely, which is, what are the common things you see from CrossFitters that you'd like to see us do better?
When it comes to weightlifting, the thing I see the most is people, like, from the first pull, so from the floor to their knee, they throw all the weight back into their heels as if you were to be doing a deadlift, because that feels stronger because you're using the big muscles and you're using the hams and the glutes in your back. But actually in weightlifting, you want that weight forward in the balls of the foot, and it's going to feel horrific, and it feels like that's going to drag you like face first into the floor for a face plant. But generally the rule in weightlifting, if it feels horrible, it's probably right. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one, is whether that's a snatch or a clean, is keeping that weight forwards. If you were to do a standing jump, you wouldn't start with the weight in your heels, you just have the weight in the balls of your feet. And if you look at the leg movement of a snatch or a clean in relation to a standing jump, is exactly the same. So you want that weight distribution to be the same. At the end of the day, people like, athletes, sprinters, throwers and stuff do things like power cleans to improve their power because of that purpose and that carryover. Yeah, I think that's probably the main one. Oh, an early arm bend as well. Trying to just lift the weight with your arms. Like, I got pretty skinny arms compared, like, some of these CrossFit girls, like, they've got absolutely yoked, and I don't know how they do it, but like,
yeah. I've never heard that in my entire life.
Like until recently, especially my arms were really skinny. Like I don't know how I lifted the weights that I did. And I think as a woman, it's more difficult as well to build that muscle mass, but you don't need big biceps to lift big weights in weightlifting, unfortunately.
Yeah, I like my big biceps, so I'm going to keep my early arm for the blood weightlifting.
The question is, would you swap your big biceps for Sarah's total?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Oh, that's a close. You know what? If you give,
We have a standing joke as well, whereas like there's not much that you wouldn't swap for like a 150 snatch.
No,
That's true.
we once played a game of like if you could snatch 150 and like bad things would happen, like what bad things would you let happen? And like it got ridiculous and stuff that we can't say on the podcast. Anything on this podcast, so let's just leave it at that. But you also, if you can snatch 150, you get everything that comes with it. You get the back squat, you get the front squat, you get all the good stuff that comes along with it, and there's not much that I wouldn't have gone on. So, last but not least, just before we go on to the sort of the fun finish questions, just your experience. I want to go into your experience at the Commonwealth, winning a medal, and just. I think what I'd like to know a little bit about is like your mindset going into it. I think that'd be really cool to hear.
Yeah, I mean, so the Commonwealths, when it came to selection, it was kind of bittersweet. So I actually got selected in the higher weight class, politics and stuff, which is a whole other podcast on its own. But so yeah, I got selected in the higher weight class, and it was one of those that, you know, I was normally at 63, I got selected at 69. I gained 6 kilos in 12 weeks, which was disgusting. I ate like a kilo of potato every day just to try and put some mass on. Because obviously you can eat shit food, right? But you're not going to train great. So like trying to eat like healthy food and just, I didn't feel hunger for weeks. It was the worst. Like it sounds great, and at the start it is. And then like once you get to like week 12 and you're still sat in the food hall, like trying to throw food in your face before you compete. Because at the end of the day, weight lifts weight. To an extent, so with such a short period of time going into it, I had to bulk hard. So yeah, that was the first hurdle, and it was fine at home because the games were April time. So at home it was fine because it was winter, so obviously I'm wearing loads of clothes and, you know, I'm not bothered whatsoever. Get out to Gold Coast and then everyone's rocking around in a bikini, and then suddenly I'm like, okay, now I'm a little bit conscious of this. But I knew it was a short-term thing, and going into it, you know, I knew I should get a medal, and it was kind of a solid bronze with a chance of silver. So kind of quietly confident of that going into it. And then it turns out on game day that I secured the silver and then put 7 kilos more on the bar than I'd ever had on a bar before in my life. I mean, my second attempt was 121, which was for a PB. And then we put 128 on the bar. So 7 kilo jump, and basically buried myself underneath it to try and get the gold medal. And I'm not sure if you've watched the video footage, but it was a pretty close call. It was just, you know, a couple of centimeters out in front, and it was a jerk very similar to the one that got me the gold medal at the under 23s, the Europeans. And I thought about doing the same thing and sticking my bum out, and then I think the amount of thoughts that go through your mind in that time, and I was like, actually it's 15 kilos more than that, and if I managed to break my spine with 113, then I could probably do myself quite a lot of damage with 128. So it was one of them that it just fell out in front. And if you actually watch it, you can hear Michaela Breeze on the commentary pretty much announced me as like Commonwealth champion, and then, you know, the bar drops. She's like Sarah Davies Commonwealth, and then it just goes, and but it wasn't meant to be. So it was kind of bittersweet standing on the podium when you've been that close to a gold medal. Like obviously it's so cool to get the silver, but to be that close to the gold just kind of leaves me with unfinished business when it comes to the Commonwealths. I mean, the next Commonwealths in 2 years' time is in Birmingham, so home games will be pretty sweet, and hopefully, you know, seal the gold there on home turf, and potentially my last Commonwealth games of my career will be pretty nice. So yeah, I mean, the whole games though out on Gold Coast in Australia was just phenomenal. Like the atmosphere, the Aussies love their sport, so you could go anywhere if you had your kit or like your accreditation, that's basically like your passport while you're rounding about the village. You know, the tourists and the people that live there kind of learnt what it looked like, and they'd stop you and they'd ask questions, and you know, all that kind of stuff, which was so cool, just to be a part of that. And, you know, as a whole team, we did exceptionally well. So it was just amazing to be a part of.
Yeah, that sounds like an experience, like I say, an experience of a lifetime, but you couldn't not go back for more after being that close.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, again, fantastic story, and I think like a lot of people will appreciate it. Was there anything sort of like going through your mind sort of on the way into it? Like, I'm only asking these questions because I'm currently reading a book about sports psychology, so I'm just like pretty curious. But like, was there any kind of doubt as you went into it, or was it just like, like, was you feeling like sort of supremely confident that you knew you were going to put in a good show? Was it like, I've done the work, or was it right, well, let's see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, my training as a whole going into the competition was really good, apart from, and Emily still reminds me of this, it was about 4 days out from my competition. I missed a 90-kilo clean and jerk in the training hall, and like properly missed it. Like tears came and everything, just because obviously the adrenaline's already starting to build at that point. Like competitions started, like teammates are already competing. We've had like the opening ceremony and stuff. And I just got absolutely like thrown around by 90-kilo clean and jerk, which considering I have pretty much, you know, 40 kilos more on that a matter of days later. But I think that just comes under like pre-competition nerves. You know, it's one of them that if your training in that last week or so doesn't go that well, it normally means that there's a good competition coming, or that's the way it seems to work for me. So it's tough when that is in the back of your mind a little bit, that kind of went so wrong, but then you've also got to remember the hours and hours that you've put in before that. You know, we had a prep camp in Brisbane, and I did some good lifting there. I snatched a PB in the training hall there, and so yeah, building up to it, like I knew I was ready, and I knew it was sort of my time to take that stage and take my medal. So that was kind of cool. And then when it comes to that last clean and jerk, I didn't even know it was on the bar until I got up onto the stage. Coaches didn't tell me that. I remember Andy Callard, he's one of our national coaches, and I was sat on a chair and he squats in front of me and he gets his hands on my shoulders and looks me dead in the eye. His forehead's about a centimetre from mine. And he goes, "It's really heavy, but I know you're going to give it a bloody good go." I was like, "Cheers, Andy." He's like, "I won't put it on the bar if I didn't think you could do it." I was like, "Okay." So
I think yeah. I think somebody to just load my bar for me and be like, go lift that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, because like, you know, if they'd have told me about that a couple of minutes before, it had been in my head and it had been going around, but it was get out there and go and see what happens. So
amazing, I love it. So we've got some kind of fun questions to finish with. We'll fire a couple of them off for you. First one is, this is purely so that I can keep adding to my book collection, but a book recommendation, and if not a book recommendation, a film recommendation.
I'm definitely not a film person, so that's me out on that. I don't have the attention span to sit down and watch a whole film. So a book that I've read fairly recently is Automatic Habits. So it is all just about setting those little bits throughout. There's been kind of circulating on social media. I think the guy actually dished it out to a load of weightlifters, which is how it came into my hands. But it is a really good read about just, you know, making those little changes so that it does become automatic and it becomes part of your daily routine.
Awesome, like it. Next question is, what is your favourite swear word?
Oh, I'm definitely an F-bomb person. Like, yeah, that's me.
I like it. I only ever ask that one when somebody's not swore very much, just to
Swear?
Yeah. What? Swearing? How dare you? Okay. I want you to give me your top 3, like, dick gym moves. So, like, curling in the squat rack, throwing chalk all over the floor, whatever.
Dropping the empty barbell from above your head, that's definitely number 1. And it's one of these things that drives me mad that you see the international athletes doing it and then people copy it. And I'm like, that bar costs like $1.5 grand, like, behave yourself. So that's definitely up there. What else?
It can be a bugbear as a coach as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something that your athletes do, and it's like, I fucking hate that.
One thing that's got me a few times is other coaches not coaching gym awareness. So you go in a gym and like, I seen someone about to pull 160 kilos off the floor for a clean and jerk, and this guy stepped over the end of the barbell, like nearly lost his nuts. Like,
that's
like people just don't realize that these weights could cause you some serious damage if they come at you at the speed that they come off the floor. And then
if I was lifting it, it wouldn't be coming off the floor very, very fast.
Third one is people like expecting everyone to be quiet for them. Like they're lifting at a world championships every time they lift. Like that gets me. Like, I mean, I'm quite happy to, I mean, I don't want people like just shouting like nonsense at me, but like the gym can keep moving and keep going whilst I'm doing my training. Like I don't expect people to stop while I'm lifting, but you get people, and it's generally on the like lower ability level that expect the world to stop for them to go for like a 70 kilo snatch or whatever. And I'm like, nah, it's not how this works in my book.
We'll try to do it in a CrossFit gym.
Oh, I've had my moments in a CrossFit gym.
For me, it's the more noise, the better as well. Like the more stuff going on, it's like I don't.
When I went to my first CrossFit competition, I was so overwhelmed. Like there's just noise everywhere, and there's bars flying everywhere, and I was just like, because a weightlifting competition is so like quiet and structured. I was like, what is this?
What are these cowboys doing?
I actually remember you lifting a Rep It Out.
Yeah, that's where it was. It's the first time I'd ever been. I walked into Rep It Out and was like, oh my god.
Because I was competing at that day at Rep It Out, and I think you were going for a clean and jerk.
Yeah, I did 122.5, which was a PB at the time.
Yeah, I remember. That was pretty cool. And I remember thinking to myself, like, the crowd was like, sort of, everyone was cheering, and I was like, I wonder if that's putting her off. Like,
it was kind of cool though, like, and it's so unknown, but Commonwealth Games was, you expect it to be quiet. And I remember standing out of that clean with the 128, and the whole room was like going crazy. And you've got like Niku Vlad, who's one of like sort of sits in the line of greats in weightlifting, like stood up waving his arms around, like trying to quieten the crowd down. And I can kind of see that out of the corner of my eye. I was like, that is more off-putting than the noise in this auditorium. So yeah, it's a funny one.
Oh, it's cool. Awesome. Love it. Right. So our last section is, we call it this or that. And basically I'll throw a couple of things at you. So example being, we'll do the first one straight away: snatch or clean and jerk.
Oh, that's a tricky one these days. Clean and jerk.
Oh, yeah. Mine would change depending what day it is. Probably depending on what I've got to do that day.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was never a snatcher, but now I hold a snatch British record and not a clean and jerk one. But I like the glory lift. When it comes to competition, you've got to be a big clean and jerk because you just slap it on the bar and go for glory. So, that's why it wins out.
I like it. This one might be a tough one: running or rowing.
Rowing.
Do you know what they are, by the way?
Hey, I tried to run a 5K the other day. I managed 2.5 and my hip started hurting. I was like, no, screw this. Rowing's easy when you're a weightlifter because you actually use your legs rather than people that are novice at rowing try and use their back and arms. So as a weightlifter, rowing's a lot easier.
Did anybody see the video of I think the Chinese weight, or it might have been Korean.
Yeah, the Chinese.
Yeah, Chinese. 2K. Rowing the 2K. They were doing like, and they just died. It was brilliant. They were all like rolling around on the floor, like dying afterwards. And I was like, something I can beat you lot at. Taking it. Front squat or back squat?
Back squat.
Pizza or ice cream?
Ice cream.
Ooh. Gold medal or £1 million?
Gold medal.
Nice. Good answer. No hesitation as
well. Well, because if you get the gold medal, then you can probably make the millions off the back of it, right? So.
I like it. I did say this to Josh earlier. I was like, I wonder what the rationale would be behind it. Cookies or donuts?
Cookies.
We've already covered this one. Books or movies?
Books.
And sports or reality TV?
Sports.
Excellent. Awesome. Right. Sarah, thank you very much for being on. Is there anything you want to, so I know you got your own business, is there anything you want to promote or talk about before we wrap it up?
Yeah, go on then. So I run Wisdom for Weightlifting, which is a online weightlifting. So do online programs of varying levels to cover various budgets. So the cheapest one being the subscription, which is just percentage based, but you can still choose from, I think it's 14 different programs to suit you, depending on days and weeks and everything else. have actually got a variation of that in the pipeline, which would be kind of cool. And then I do more personalized stuff as well. So it's completely personalized to you. You send me your information, I ask you for some videos, and then I look at your technique and work a program out based on that. And I do actually run sort of seminars and workshops and stuff as well when all this craziness dies down. So yeah, they're a good fun day, and we strip it right back to basics and build up again, and hopefully people learn a lot from the day. And
so if we was to get you down for a seminar or workshop,
mm-hmm.
there'd be one condition.
Oh,
You'd have to do
first.
You'd have to do a Metcon with us.
Oh, I did a CrossFit. In fact, I did the Open one year, and I did Tribal Clash.
Right.
So
okay.
I have actually CrossFitted.
CrossFitted.
Okay. I like it. So yeah, we definitely have to have a little chat about that when we wrap it up in a second. So stay on for us, because we're definitely looking for people to run some seminars at the gym when we get back open.
Cool.
So anything else? Sorry, I know you got some sponsors.
Yeah, so I have MirrorFit who sponsored me. They've been an absolute worldie recently with the whole lockdown stuff. So they've been great. And I mean, I know most equipment people now are sold out across the board, but they're a great one. And SBD have supported me for the longest time. We've kind of worked together the whole way since they started up as a business. Wasn't that too long into my career. So we've worked together as we've gone, which is super cool. Yeah. And then just find me on social media, and I have got a YouTube channel which I'm now trying to populate a little bit more, so go and check that out too for general daily musings of what I've been up to and tips and tricks and stuff.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely link up to all that in the show notes, so we'll get all that off you after the show. Again, Sarah, thank you very much for being on today. For everybody who's listening, thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, comment. Down there somewhere, the subscribe button is. And again,
this big, that little red smudge that you can see.
The more you can do that, the more you help us out, the more you help us produce more of these, and keep the good content and good times coming. So again, 5-star reviews are always helpful, and thank you very much to Sarah for being on again today. See you later, everyone. Peace.
Thanks. Bye.